Hello, my name is Morgan Fischer, and this is my last transmission. Well, it is also my first, but that's only because I just now managed to find where Brian stashed the comms device. But that doesn't matter. Nothing matters. They are all dead now. And I will be as well. My only hope is that this message gets heard in a time to stop anyone else from suffering the same fate. This all started with a rescue mission. I was recruited along with the rest of my team to search for a whereabouts of IC Trident, the first in its class of international space explorers. Its purpose was to explore the previously uncharted sector known as Sector Wekos. Sector Wekos was chosen for the maiden voyage of the IC Trident because it is one of the locations with the least data in Mother's archives. In fact, the only flag on the file is the one marked Deadly. The mission went on well for a time, until the ship landed on a first solid planet. Shortly after touching down, all communication was lost and the ship went dark. That's where my crew came into the picture. We are the most prestigious search and rescue team in this branch of the galaxy. Or so I'm told. Our ship, the IC Telegrand, was the prototype of the IC Trident. We helped pioneer the Dynaflux engine, the first of its kind to utilize a hyperhydrocarbon fuel. This did not set my mind at ease, but then again, we never took a job that was easy or reassuring. I would like to introduce you to the crew, but there is no point in now. All that matters is that Brian had the backup comms. This one I'm speaking to you with now. He told me about it with his dying breath. We landed on the first planet we saw. It appeared to be made primarily of precious metals. You can't mistake that sheen. Not only did we spot the IC Trident, completely unscathed with the landing gear engaged, but a myriad of other ancient space cruisers, most of which can now only be found in museums. As if things weren't ominous enough, a heavy mist obscured the ground. We quickly landed a safe distance away, keeping the graveyard of the ships within eyesight, but far enough to spot any oncoming danger. We donned our exosuits and engaged our spark rifles. We were not prepared for what we found when we exited the ship. We approached with caution, of course. That is the protocol after all. At first glance, there wasn't a single sign of life, just the ships sticking out of the ground like monuments. Still, we kept formation until we arrived at the site. Then, shapes began to emerge on the ground through the mist. I can still remember the fear that struck through my heart when our squad leader Benjamin barked, "Contact!" We all brandished our spark rifles at the shapes, ready to engage at his say-so. He instructed us to hold fire as he tried in vain to communicate with the shapes. He demanded them to emerge and show themselves, but they ignored him. Benjamin continued to follow the rules of engagement to the T. It felt like hours. Finally, someone broke formation. It was Marcus, our second in command. He had a disdain for the book as much as Benjamin was by it. This contrast made him a great squad leader and co-leader. Marcus had enough, and he was sure to vocalize as much as he pushed past Benjamin and approached the nearest shape. It appeared to be a round lamp about 5 yards from the Class 3 Star Cruiser, a once grand hauling ship. Once at the lamp, Marcus looked down at it and stopped dead in his tracks. Despite the distance and obstruction of his face through the helmet, we could see the color drain from it. Jane called out to him to tell us what he saw. I could see her finger trembling on the trigger of her rifle. He appeared to choke on his words before finally getting a sentence out. It's a suit, guys. It's a suit with a skeleton in it. I saw a wave of confusion wash across the rest of my crew. Marcus grew more frantic and began dashing from blob to blob. His scream at each one was the same as the last, an empty suit with skeleton in it. Benjamin called for him to stand down, but that did not seem to quell the mood. Admitting defeat, we were told to break formation and inspect the site. Also obeying was the mist, which parted with our footsteps as we approached the suits, revealing the ground and the suits which were covered in a thick pink goop. Brian pushed forward past all of us with his matter analyzer. After a moment the machine beeped, and he confirmed what we all thought. It was blood. Human blood. A wave of terror swept across the crew. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. Benjamin urged us all to remain calm, but Jane had had enough. She began a mad dash to the ship. In her haste, she had tripped over another lifeless suit, fallen to the ground, her feet entangled. Marcus rushed to help her up, and neither saw it coming. Unfortunately, the rest of us did. It looked like an oil spill, except it had no definition. It's like the light ignored it. It must have followed us from our landing site. We were focused on navigating the mist. We probably even walked right past it. The horrendous life form descended on Marcus and Jane, extending a long tentacle with filaments appearing around the appendage. We opened fire without hesitation. Our shots appeared to dissipate upon the impact. The monster did not react. It continued its descent toward Marcus and Jane, as he struggled to wrestle her to her feet in her panicked state. I couldn't hear anything over the comms, but from the looks on their faces, I could tell that they were screaming. It's one of many things I wish I could forget, but I guess it's not going to be an issue for much longer. We continued to fire to no avail. Benjamin held up his fists, ordering us to hold formation. It took everything in me to not disobey. We had to stand in horror as the abomination descended on Marcus and Jane. We were helpless, as the monster drained their life from their bodies. I looked around at the others. Brian looked as if he saw a ghost. Rather, a demon. I shouted to Benjamin, begging for him to do something. The abomination continued to hover over Marcus and Jane's lifeless bodies, their suits limp on the ground. A pink goo oozed around them, the very same we had seen before. To our surprise, the tentacle began to recede, and the beast began to approach us. Benjamin looked towards us and told us to run back to the ship. We protested, but he insisted. I'll never forget the look of determination and fear on his face. After a final salute, we began sprinting back to the ship. I could hear my heartbeat, and my breath was fogging up my helmet. I could hear my suit's air conditioning trying to compensate in vain against my heavy breathing. Time seemed to slow to a crawl, and despite the fact that I was running full speed, it didn't seem that we were moving at all. The smoky haze began to rise up, nearly obscuring my view through the biosuit. As the ship began to come into view, I saw it. Another one of those things was in our way. I froze in fear as it bobbed through the fog, inching closer to me. Brian pushed past me, spark rifle drawn and firing at the beast. He turned his head and he told me to run. He also told me where I could find this. He was trying to tell me something else when we both saw that hideous black tentacle launch towards him. I ran a pace that made my previous one seem like a mere crawl. Tears were rolling down my face as I heard Brian's bone-chilling screams behind me. My heart was pounding and I was afraid of even drawing a breath because of the mere chance of it slowing me down. Just as it felt like all hope was lost and I was on my way to meet Mother, I was at the bay door of the ship. I quickly punched in the passcode and made my way to the command center. I tried to start the engines, but a low fuel warning kept running across the screen. I could have sworn we had landed with a nearly full tank, but I had no time to run diagnostics. I could see the jet black abomination and its friends surrounding the ship. My hair stood on end as the last drop of adrenaline coursed through my body. I quickly ran to where Brian told me where the comms was, and here we are. Thanks for listening to my story. I keep hearing this strange beeping. I hope it stops soon. I don't have much oxygen left. I just hope it runs out before the demons find their way in here.
Critical life signs detected. Engaging escape protocol.
Today is the third day since Morgan arrived in our facility. Although she is still recovering from grave injuries, she's showing signs of awakening. We recovered her and her comms log through our experimental transport technology. Only, it wasn't her we were expecting. We've been working with Brian Pages on some experimental tech, and in exchange he was supposed to transport us some precious metals from a planet he was doing a recovery on. Evidently, it did not go as planned. Clearly the intel we had was incomplete, and we were unaware of the hostile life form. We've cross-referenced her account with some old documents we had access to, thanks to Brian. Surprisingly, it's one only thought to be an old space sailor myth. The life form is a carbomox, one whose diet consists solely of carbon. Unfortunately, the crew of the Telegrand and the Trident fit that description. Sadly, Brian isn't here to celebrate the discovery of what was that to be a cryptoxenomorph. That's really all I know. I can show you to the medbay where we have Morgan. Then, I assume me and my crew will be detained?
That won't be necessary. We have a great interest in the work you've been doing here. Let there be no mistake. We owe you now. Show me where Morgan is, and then let's meet back here. I have some work for you.